Hello, I'm Goon, and today I want to show you a solid game that I've spent some quality time on called Peasant Quest. Please subscribe, hit the bell, and let's do it. So starting off, after walking to the village, you literally have nothing, so you get stuck with some simple fetch quests by the local villagers and doing a repeatable farm job with the locals to get some shelter and coin. I have to be honest, it's a little slow at the beginning, and you have to earn the art scenes, if you know what I'm getting at, but it gets better after the initial hour or two. However, if that's not interesting to you, I would just drop your save in the save editor and increase your coin and base stats so you can quickly get to the better parts of the game. Once you're done with that, you can start to slowly explore the local area, get some better quests, access to a house, potion making mechanic, become a boss of a goblin tribe, and mayor of the village, which in my opinion, the best quest line in the game thus far. Speaking of quest lines, this game's quests tend to feed into each other. Now, this can be both a positive and a negative aspect of the game. The positive is that it helps make the story feel more interconnected, instead of several separate storylines that just join up suddenly at the end of the game. Major negative is that it forces you to stop interacting with characters you want to interact with for several hours until you complete other prerequisite quest lines. For example, you may have liked the elf, but after a certain point, you can't continue with her until you've completed like 5 to 10 hours of unrelated quests from other girls. Looking more broadly at the game's quest design, there's a lot of fetch quests of go get me X and come back. You'll go do that, you'll come back, and then you'll get some art. It's very simple. I would say that sometimes it can get a little annoying because some quests need you to go gather materials, probably get annoyed gathering things like moonflower pollen, firewood, and crystallized eggs. But overall, I would say more often than not, it presents you passable quests, and more importantly, the promised reward often gives you enough motivations to get through some of the more boring quests you'll have to do. The game is very generic sound-wise. The music you've heard throughout the entire video is what you're going to be hearing 60 to 70% of the time. Generally, you'll hear the action music and the village music, and that's it. You also have a small selection of sounds for your enemies, so you'll often hear the identical screeching sound multiple times, and it can get a little annoying if you're fighting the same enemy types several times in a row. So, while there are some sounds, it is a very bare-bone component of the game. Peasant Quest is an RPG Maker game, so it has all the strengths and weaknesses of that engine. The gameplay is top-down, and you move between segments of the map. You have a pretty generic turn-based RPG Maker system, and you level up your stats and get stronger as you complete quests, beat creatures, and so on. A typical RPG Maker game. So while saying that, there's some quality of life issues that the author should address. I mentioned before that there's a lot of material gathering for quests, especially later on. The author, to offset this, eventually allows you access to farms. However, you get access to them quite late and requires too much manual input from the player. So, in order to farm, it requires gathering materials for the farming plot, planting the crop, waiting 7+ days, then manually harvesting it. It's too much boring, grindy, busy work. I think the author should automate the whole process of farming so that once we set up the farm, it automatically replants, grows, and collects produce to maybe a chest location for the player to later collect. There's also another problem with the game's fast travel system. You get portal gates that act as fixed fast travel points later in the story, but they are spread out too thin and often require the player to go through multiple segments to get where you want to get to. For example, there are certain places like the tower or the temple where the quest giver is at the very top of the floor and you get plenty of quests from them and you have to report back to them for many of their quests, and the nearest teleport is outside their tower, so you have to go past 3 to 4 segments just to get to them. There should be many more portals for the player. I would just copy Neomore Quest, maybe I'll review that in the future, and just place it everywhere you possibly can to reduce empty gameplay. Now a quick word for the turn-based gameplay. I'd once again recommend the player just cheat and increase their stats with the save editor and just get it over with. Often you're going to be dealing with plenty of pretty generic enemies. There are a few fights that I would classify as particularly epic or special, The turn-based gameplay is slow, and the abilities that you learn are pretty bland and uninteresting. So you just want to get it over with and get to the better stuff in the game, which is the story and the... Last but certainly not least, the aspect that's most important for these types of games, the art. I would say Peasant's Quest's art is good, and although some initial renders are rough,
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that? What is that?
it is the best part of the game. With potions, you can get multiple variations of the art scenes. Family creation is a heavily featured tag in the game, so much so that you kind of fear what the gene pool will look like in 20 years' time, as their character has claimed every woman within a 50-mile radius of the village. There are also animations in the art scenes. Generally, they're well done, but there is lag in between each animation of about 2 to 4 seconds, and they can be a bit annoying when you're trying to do your business. There is also a plethora of art scenarios, doing art with other people's wives, elves, giants, spiders, ogres, demons, and a whole lot of other stuff. And although some of these creatures lean a little bit more in the monster category than I personally like, variety ensures that whatever you like, it's here. Although I've certainly talked some negatives about the game, I think a lot of the negatives mostly come from the game being developed for such a long time period. This project started in 2017, around 7 years of development, and it shows. It has become a bit bloated and expanded far beyond what the author originally envisioned. Refining some of these aspects would make major improvements to the game, but I think a lot of it also comes from the RPG Maker engine and require major overhauls that would likely only come from a sequel. However, despite all of the faults, Peasant's Quest is still a solid ERO adventure game. For the game itself, I give a 6 out of 10 on the bell curve, and for the art aspects of the game, generally what I do is either delete the game or suggest you put it in your work folder for later use. I would recommend Peasant Quest be put in your work folder. Anyways, this is Goon. Thanks for watching, and if you have any recommendations, leave it in the comments, and I'll see you next time.